You're listening to the Doctors In podcast from martinclinic.com. Although we share a lot of practical and, in our opinion, awesome information, what you hear on this podcast is not intended to diagnose, cure, treat, or prevent any disease. It's strictly for informational purposes. So enjoy. Hi, I'm Dr. Martin Jr.
I'm Dr. Martin Sr.
And this is the Doctors In podcast. And today we want to talk about autoimmune disorders. Now, what's really unfortunate is the amount of people that now have autoimmune disorders. I remember reading a statistic not long ago that if you're a woman, you have a 1 in 9 chance of developing an autoimmune disorder. So they've exploded in diagnosis over the years. They're just becoming so much more common. So what we want to do today is talk about autoimmune disorders in general, talk about what we think is going on, and then 5 of the biggest causes of autoimmune disorders. And then we'll talk about what you can do naturally to kind of help fix what's going on in the background. So as I mentioned right off the start of this episode, they have become, you've been in practice 45 years.
Crazy. You see it every day.
Compared to when you started,
yeah.
Right? So if you look back to when you started, did they have electricity back then?
I remember. I'm ancient.
I know you lived in a world where, despite science, you had to walk both ways up a hill to school, both times. The school was
on snowshoes.
Yeah, both ways.
Yeah.
So for some reason, there was a tilt in the axis or something. You had to walk.
I told you guys that, and then I'm telling my grandchildren that.
Oh, I know, because my kids have said that you were telling them that as well. So
of course, yeah. But I'll tell you, just to give you a little background in that sense, the first time I saw a real epidemic of autoimmune was in the late, let's say mid-'80s to the early 90s, like the first wave of real difficult diagnoses in terms of autoimmune, and that was on chronic fatigue syndrome, right? Because that really is an autoimmune disorder. So is fibromyalgia in that sense, right? Because fibro is just a symptom, I believe, of chronic fatigue. But that was the first wave. And now, in our practice, of course, we see autoimmune. I see it every day.
Well, yeah, and now there are over 100 different types of autoimmune disorders. And, of course, the most common ones are things like celiac, right? Hashimoto's so much more common. The amount of women who are getting diagnosed with Hashimoto's is just unbelievable. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes about what's going on in the background. But Hashimoto's, lupus, MS, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, right? MS is definitely growing as well. And then you got asthma's like crazy. Yeah. I remember you used to talk about asthma being the canary in the coal mine in a lot of ways, which is interesting. A lot of inflammatory bowel diseases now, psoriasis, right? Eczemas, rheumatoid arthritis, ALS is another way. Oh, yeah. So much more common. But there are other ones as well that are not officially, and I'm doing air quotes here for those that are wondering, that are not officially diagnosed. And you mentioned like chronic fatigue syndrome. You've mentioned fibromyalgia, and also Meniere's disease as well, right? Which is an inner ear issue. For a lot of people, it can be treated as if it's an autoimmune disorder, and the information that we're going to share today will help along the lines of that as well. And here's the thing. We put out an email not long ago asking the question, can you have a hidden autoimmune disorder? Because here's the thing. Here's the most common symptoms of an autoimmune disorder. Now, again, we'll get into this in a lot more detail in a second, but fatigue is a common, right? Heat intolerance, rapid heart rate, hives, sensitive to the sun, hair loss, digestive issues, sore joints, muscle pain, tremors, weight gain or weight loss, memory. Those are generic symptoms that can be a lot of different things across the board, but they're also common in autoimmune disorders. So there are a lot of people who have thyroid going on, for example. They got a lot of these symptoms, and what they actually have is an autoimmune disorder, which is why, well, it's not the only reason, but it's a big reason why. A lot of it has to do with lab values in general, but it's a big reason why a lot of women who have Hashimoto's, they get on thyroid medication and they don't feel better. Now, they may feel better for a bit, but they got to constantly adjust their medications because the body's attacking its own thyroid.
Yeah.
And that's really, and we'll talk like really, the definition of an autoimmune disorder is when your own immune system attacks your own cells. And again, you can have an autoimmune disorder in pretty much any part of your body because your immune system is everywhere and it can attack any part of your body. So if you have an autoimmune disorder of your skin, you may end up something like psoriasis or eczema. If you have an autoimmune disorder of the thyroid, Hashimoto's. If you have it of your joints, you can have lupus or rheumatoid arthritis. It can attack your bowels. You can get inflammatory type stuff. It can attack anything. If it attacks your brain stem, you can end up with like ALS, MS, same thing. So, I mean, you can end up with this anywhere. But the reality is they're 3 times more common today than they were even a couple decades ago. And if you're a woman especially, you're more likely to end up with a autoimmune disorder. And statistically speaking, women have, what is it now, 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 chance of breast cancer?
Yeah, it's 1 in 7.
1 in 9 chance of an autoimmune disorder. So, I mean, things are starting to add up. So what we want to do today is talk about autoimmune disorders and talk about what we think some of the biggest reasons why we're seeing an explosion, and then also what we can do naturally to help fix them. So what we have to do is start off with a conversation, I think, 2 conversations. The first one's about cause and effect, right? Because in reality, the autoimmune disorder is the effect. It's not the cause. So you have to figure out what's triggering. At the end of the day, there's something that's triggering your immune system to get funny and start to attack its own cells. So there's always a cause. Now, that cause may be difficult to figure out, but there's always a cause. It doesn't just spontaneously, for no reason whatsoever, start. There's always a reason. There's always something that triggers your immune system to start attacking its own cells. Now, you and I, we'll share it now, but a real simplistic way of looking at the immune system. Now, we'll give the warning now. This is an oversimplistic overview of how the immune system works. It's obviously a lot more complicated than this, but this is a good overview of what's going on. From the time you are one cell, right? From the very beginning, that cell, once it starts to divide, there's a protein in there that basically, we like to tell people it's kind of like a barcode. It's a protein, it's a barcode, and that barcode gets in every cell of your body.
Yeah, it's you.
It's you. And so imagine your immune system is going around scanning cells, right? If it has that barcode, if it has that protein, your immune system knows it's your own cell. So it scans it, no, it's me. Scans it, no, it's me. Scans it, it's me. Scans a cell, no, it's not me. We better attack it. It's not supposed to be here, right? And that's an oversimplistic view of how the immune system works, but there's a lot going on there, obviously. But that's the basic idea. Something happens along the way where the immune system no longer recognizes that cell,
even though it's yours,
and actually starts to view it as a threat and starts to attack it. Now, what's interesting, a lot of times it's caused by inflammation. Inflammation can mess up that signaling between the cells, right? Cause it to attack itself.
Yeah. Well, we see it a lot, eh? It's incredible. And like you say, it's so much more prevalent today.
Now, what's interesting is, so if we take that analogy, something has to disrupt that signal between the immune system and the cells. So what's doing that? What's the cause? Well, there's a lot of different causes, but we've kind of narrowed it down to the 5 biggest causes of what's going on. So imagine cause and effect. You have a cause, and that cause is leading to inflammation. And then the inflammation is basically messing up the way your immune system works. And then your immune system starts to attack its own cells. And then you end up with symptoms and you have an autoimmune disorder. So correcting the problem, in order to fix the problem, you have to fix the cause. And you have to get the immune system to start acting normal again. But the nice thing is if you can get rid of that inflammation, you can get rid of the cause, then the immune systems are just doing its job.
Yeah.
They're just going to continue doing their job. They're just going to be able to properly recognize, for keeping it simple, they're going to be able to recognize its own cells, and they're not going to attack it. So if you have psoriasis, the immune system will no longer attack your skin cells. If you have Hashimoto's, no longer attack your thyroid, right? So that's the key. That's what we're trying to figure out today. So let's talk about those 5 big things, right? Now, the biggest one is leaky gut.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, to be honest, I've never seen a case, really. You talk about from MS to lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and we sort of coin these things: leaky gut, leaky skin, leaky gut, leaky brain, leaky gut, leaky lungs, asthma, leaky gut, whatever, right? It's the key has to be the gut. It doesn't mean that it's the only thing going wrong, but it's certainly one of the key factors, because I've never seen exceptions to it.
And that's the thing. Leaky gut is, in our opinion, everybody who has an autoimmune disorder has leaky gut syndrome.
Yeah.
But again, here's the thing. It's cause and effect. Leaky gut does not just spontaneously show up.
Mm-hmm.
Something has to trigger leaky gut to start.
Yeah.
And we have a great video on our website where we talk about all the different causes of leaky gut, things that can affect the way that your gut works just at the basic level. And those things could be a cause of leaky gut, which then can lead to inflammation, which can then mess up the immune system, which can lead to an autoimmune disorder.
Yeah.
So leaky gut, when we say leaky gut, there's a lot of things that can cause leaky gut syndrome.
Yeah.
Stress can cause it.
Yeah.
Stress is a big cause of leaky gut syndrome.
Yeah.
Cortisol inflames the gut, leads to increased permeability, meaning things that can get through the gut lining into the blood that should never get into the blood.
Yeah.
And that can cause a whole bunch of problems.
Cortisol. And if it isn't the original cause, it aggravates everything, because it's like the expression we like to use. It's adding gasoline, fuel to the fire, right? It creates all that enormous inflammation. One of the biggest things that I see with leaky gut, and it's just because I'm always asking questions in the office. So when I see someone autoimmune, I'm always going backwards to see, now, were you on lots of antibiotics as a kid? Because that's the question I ask. Or a couple of years ago? Or whatever. Because, look, antibiotics save your life. So I don't downplay the benefits of antibiotics, but the double-edged sword of antibiotics is leaky gut. And boy, oh boy, I'll tell you, it's almost invariable. It's one of the key factors for a lot of people that end up with autoimmune is they've had a series of antibiotics, sometimes lots of them, especially as kids, and it comes back to haunt them when they get older. And I'm telling you, it's part of that equation, because it's a big factor, not the only factor in leaky gut, but it's certainly one of the main causes of leaky gut, because you can't get away, almost without exception, you can't get away from what antibiotics do, and they kill good, bad, and ugly. I mean, antibiotics, broad spectrum, kill your friendly bacteria.
And studies have shown they actually leave a little, almost like a fingerprint for a long time after.
Yeah.
And we talked about this on a previous episode.
Yeah.
Some of your good bacteria never comes back.
No.
It doesn't come back, right? Which, again, talks about the importance of a good probiotic. We get asked, especially this time of year, if I'm taking an antibiotic, should I take a probiotic? Yes, right? You absolutely should be taking a probiotic. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, if you look at the history of people with autoimmune disorders, they definitely have a history. A big percentage of them have a history of using or having taken a fair amount of antibiotics or other drugs, because there's a lot of other drugs that can kill the microbiome as well, right? There's a lot of other drugs out there, a lot of pain medications. And
almost all drugs, almost all medications. One of the side effects is certainly leaky gut.
Well, because they've discovered this concept of a microbiome, which is just the bacteria that is beneficial to us, and researchers are calling it another organ. You can't live without it. You'd be dead without it. You can't be healthy without a good microbiome. So, I mean, they understand the importance of it. When they did a lot of these drug testing, they never looked at the effect it had on microbiome because they didn't know about it. And now they're finding out that a lot of these things have a negative impact on your microbiome, which is, again, why people should be taking probiotics, a good probiotic when they're taking medication, even if they're not. But that's what's going on. So there's a lot of things, and it's important to understand that. So a lot of times when it comes to naturally dealing with an autoimmune disorder is fixing the gut. And this is important to understand. Just because you have leaky gut syndrome does not necessarily mean you're going to be having digestive symptoms. But a lot of people with autoimmune do have digestive symptoms. They either have a change in bowel habits, they get bloating, got gallbladder issues, or they've had their gallbladder removed, they got low stomach acid, they got a whole bunch of these symptoms, right? Burping or whatever, heartburn. So they may have a digestive symptom that's going on in the background, but they've got to fix the gut. There's no question. A lot of the healing starts at that level. And because one of the things that you and I have talked about quite a bit off air that's fascinating is, so what happens, what makes leaky gut a problem is what it allows into the blood, right? I mean, the whole point of your bowels, your gut lining, is to be what they call selectively permeable. They allow certain things in and they stop other things.
Yeah,
leaky
bad
gut,
guys out.
Bad guys out. Leaky gut, basically, just imagine the pores opening up a little bit and allowing more things in there. So they're allowing bad things to get in, undigested food, toxins, fungus, and that's what we want to talk about a little bit here, is we're starting to see how much of a problem fungus, candida is. Yeah. You and I have talked about candida for brain, and then studies come out now showing that it can cross the blood-brain barrier.
Scary.
Yeah, it's terrifying when you think about it. But candida is a major problem. We're loaded with fungus now. It's everywhere. So the problem with leaky gut is it allows things to get in that shouldn't get in. But as we've mentioned before, a lot of those things shouldn't even have got into your gut in the first place. They should have been killed by your acid in your stomach or your gallbladder. So it's really a systemic. So when we say leaky gut allows the bad things to get in, but the bad things can get in because they weren't killed when they should have been killed. Yeah. So it's really a gut digestive problem. Like digestion, there's 5 major components of digestion. You have the stomach acid, right? You have stomach, you have the gallbladder, you have the liver, you have the pancreas, and then you have the bowels. Yeah. When it comes to those bad things not getting killed, well, the stomach didn't do its job, the gallbladder didn't do its job, the liver didn't do its job, and then now you have the pancreas. We'll give it a pass on there because it's busy doing a lot of other things. But that's what's happening. So the upper digestive system failed as well, miserably, right? It didn't do its job. So they have, if you have an autoimmune disorder, you have leaky gut, you have a digestive issue. Yeah. Here's another thing. A lot of leaky gut can start off because your upper part of your digestive system is not working. Yeah. And it strains your gut. It causes inflammation. So if you can have a gut lining that's stopping stuff from getting in, but if your stomach acid's low and your gallbladder is not there no more, or it's just not doing its job, your gut lining's being bombarded with junk. It's stressing it out, right?
Because the furnace is supposed to burn it down, right? When you think of what your stomach acid does, right? It takes anything that's coming in, including candida, and it's supposed to kill it. It shouldn't get even into your gut, right?
And that's the problem. So when we say that leaky gut is a major cause of autoimmune, now here's the thing, right? A lot of people in this world have leaky gut, and a lot of them don't have an autoimmune disorder. That's the reality. Yeah. But if you have leaky gut, some may have IBS. Some may have joint pain. Some may have brain issues. Some can have skin. A lot of skin conditions directly tied into the health of your gut, right? So there's a lot of things going on, but there's a percentage of people that when they have leaky gut and they get inflammation and they get cortisol increases and they get all these things going on, it eventually can mess up the way the immune system works, and then it starts to attack its own cells. So leaky gut can go to a lot of different things, and not everybody that has leaky gut that's going to have an autoimmune disorder, but everybody that has autoimmune disorder has leaky gut. That's a pretty safe thing in a sense to say. So a big part of naturally dealing with an autoimmune is fixing the gut. Even if you don't think your gut is a problem, because you're not getting traditional digestive symptoms. But I'm willing to bet that if you took a questionnaire of all the digestive symptoms, you would have them. Yeah. You would have some for sure.
Yeah.
If you have an autoimmune disorder, you have something going on gut. So leaky gut is a starting point for a lot of autoimmune disorders. And whatever can cause leaky gut can eventually be the trigger that leads to an autoimmune disorder. So when we say leaky gut as a cause, we're saying whatever can cause leaky gut can lead to an autoimmune disorder. Yeah. So that's the first one. Leaky gut's a big one. A second big one, chemicals, right? Chemicals cause inflammation. They don't cause fevers like the old bacteria did. They cause a disruption in the immune system because the amount of inflammation they cause. And we are living in a chemical world. They're everywhere. Yeah. Chemicals are everywhere.
100,000 chemicals, new chemicals have been created since World War II, at least. Like you say, you can't leave the planet. You're going to be surrounded by chemicals. You've expressed this before, when we talk about plastic, for example, it's in the air. You're breathing plastic in. And I always say that autoimmune is somebody's, the canary in the coal mine. And, we can put 10 people in a room and 10 people breathe the same air, drink the same water or whatever. But if you have any kind of sensitivity or if your microbiome isn't right, those chemicals can cause your body to overreact to them. They see them as something that disrupts, and then your body attacks, right? And you overattack.
And here's the thing with chemicals. So chemicals can hurt your immune system in two ways. One, chemicals can directly affect the way that the cells signal and talk to each other. Mm-hmm. So it can cut off radio communication, right? Like every movie where, it doesn't matter the movie. If the two main characters have walkie-talkies, at some point something disrupts their communication, right? At some point. It doesn't matter what it is. They're pushing on the button and they can't hear each other. Chemicals can do that between the cells in your immune system directly. But then chemicals also create inflammation, which can then disrupt further. Yeah. So chemicals can be a double whammy. And here's the thing. There was, there's a lot of studies we can look at, but one large study tested a bunch of people, tested their urine, and 93% of them had glyphosate in their urine, right? 93%. And here, I want to read you a quote from a study that was done on babies, all right? So in 2005, researchers found 287 industrial chemicals, including pesticides, phthalates, dioxin, flame retardants, and the breakdown of chemicals from Teflon in the fetal cord of 10 newborn infants from around the country. So transmitted to the infants by their mothers, exposures before and during pregnancy. So kids are born into this world already loaded with chemicals. I mean, that's incredible to think about. So we live in a chemical world. Oh, yeah. So there's no
toxic soup.
There's no question why we see an increase in autoimmune disorders. And here's the thing. You can't prevent that. It's that you can't. You can reduce it. You can avoid it as much as you can, but it is everywhere. You can go completely organic, plastic-free, fragrance-free.
They don't give you a straw in the restaurants anymore.
You can do all that stuff, but you're going to be exposed to chemicals. So you can't run from that. So the key is you want to build up the defense your body has against chemicals. You want to make sure that your liver's working properly. You want to make sure that your digestive tract's working properly. You want to make sure your immune system is up to par. You can't avoid chemicals. They're everywhere. But chemicals can trigger autoimmune, and chemicals also can be a major cause of leaky gut as well. So chemicals are a big cause. Yeah. But again, you can't avoid them. Yeah. You can reduce exposure for sure. You can reduce exposure, but you can't completely avoid chemicals. So that's the thing. So we talked about leaky gut. We talked about chemicals. You like to mention heavy metals.
Yeah. Yeah. mercury, lead, cadmium. And your body is so receptive to those things because they do mimic in a lot of ways their structure of certain minerals, even in the like magnesium and potassium. And so your body, it's amazing how many people are walking around with mercury, lead, cadmium in their system, and they don't even know it. And again, it's part of the toxic soup, right? Lead, and it's in the soil. Anything coming out of China, just about has got lead in it. And women that wear makeup and lipstick and shampoos and, you know what I mean? The high fructose corn syrup.
And that's where we talk about reducing your exposure, right? There are better makeups out there, shampoos out there. You want to reduce your exposure.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. So heavy metals, again, they can disrupt the way the immune system works. They can cause a bunch of inflammation, but they are definitely can be, for some people, the cause that leads to an autoimmune disorder, right? Here's another one, and this is a big one as well. Vegetable oils, processed foods, right? Vegetable oils irritate the lining of most people's guts. And when that happens, you end up with leaky gut. And when that happens, as we've talked about many times on this episode, can lead to autoimmune disorders. Also, there's something to be said about the ratio between omega-6s, which are found in processed vegetable oils, and omega-3s. And if your intake of omega-6s is a lot more than your intake of omega-3s, that ratio can lead to a lot of problems, right? Right now, I think it's 18-1. I think it might even be higher.
I think it's crazy.
I thought I read somewhere around 25-1, but the last thing that I remember reading specifically was 18-1, meaning we consume on average 18 times more omega-6s than we do omega-3s. And that ratio is a disaster. That ratio is a recipe for disaster. For some people, that alone can cause such an inflammatory reaction and a gut disruption that alone could be the cause for some people of autoimmune, right? So that's a big issue as well. We consume a ton of vegetable oils in our diet. If you eat out, if you buy packaged foods, they're all vegetable oils. And
they last, you see.
And listen, vegetable oil is a tremendous marketing job. I mean, vegetables are always healthy in people's head, always. So how do you make an oil that's not healthy sound healthy? Call it a vegetable oil.
Yeah, because it's really, you can run your car on this stuff.
They're not,
it's industrialized, right?
If
highly
go
processed.
on YouTube and look at how canola oil is made. Yeah. There's nothing natural about canola oil, yet it's a vegetable oil, right? And it's healthy vegetable oil. So again, that's a big problem, which is why a lot of people do well when they increase their intake of omega-3.
Omega-3, yeah.
And then they lower their processed food or their omega-6 intake, and it's amazing how much better they feel. And then the fifth thing that we want to talk about quickly are food allergies, right? There are a lot of people that have these hidden food allergies. They're not that hidden. They're getting a lot of symptoms. They just don't know it's because of a food allergy. Yeah. They got mucus. They always have an asthma. They have headaches, or they have digestive issues. They have skin issues. They got bags under their eyes or whatever. They got these symptoms. So when we say hidden, they're not hidden. I mean, their symptoms are there. They just are not. They don't know where to look. Yeah. They're not sure what they are.
Yeah. They can't equate it with.
No, it's funny because people will talk to us about, I get a lot of asthma and a lot of coughing and a lot of mucus, and then it's like, okay, you ask them some questions, and it's usually around after a meal, and it's like then you can narrow it down, and it's like, yeah, I mean, you can't have dairy, or you can't have eggs. Yeah. Eggs is a common, unfortunately, because it's such a good food.
Yeah, it's such a good food, but
I can't eat eggs. I can't eat eggs,
and it's a lot worse today than it was. But again, that goes back to the change, I believe, in the microbiome, because now eggs, which are 100% good for you.
Every time I can't eat an egg, I blame Mom. She was on antibiotics for, 8 years? 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
the whole pregnancy with me on antibiotics.
She was, and as a little girl, for 8 years.
8
lost
years.
a kidney in the 1950s.
And that's what they did. They
right?
just put her on antibiotics forever.
Yeah.
So I can't eat eggs. That's probably the reason. I just like to tease her about it. But I can't enjoy.
She can't even eat eggs.
No, she can't even eat eggs either. But yeah, it's amazing.
I
right?
make up for it for you both of you guys.
And my wife makes up for it. And unfortunately, I can't eat eggs.
No.
And even my kids can tolerate eggs, but they can't eat.
They can't live on them.
They definitely can't. And if they have eggs one day, they got to take some time off in between type of thing. But food allergies, again, are so common today that most people have an intolerance to a food and they don't even know it. They don't even know it. And that, again, can trigger inflammation, can trigger an autoimmune disorder, which again goes back to eating, goes back to the gut to fix it. So we've been talking a fair amount here about some big concepts for autoimmune. Let's talk about how to approach from a natural standpoint. How do you approach dealing with an autoimmune disorder? Now, here's the thing. So an autoimmune, as we mentioned at the top, can affect any organ. So let's just say that you have Hashimoto's, all right? So here's the thing. You have to address the cause, you have to fix the gut, and then you have to help repair the thyroid. So there's kind of 3 steps involved. And actually there's a 4th step because you have to help the immune system. So really there's 4 steps to dealing with any autoimmune. So if you have rheumatoid, for example, well, you have to identify the cause, you have to fix the gut, you have to help the immune system, and then you got to do something to help repair and specifically for the joints. So it's kind of a 4-step process, regardless of where you have an autoimmune disorder. But let's start with food. Let's just, again, with the way somebody should eat if they have an autoimmune disorder.
Well, number one, pretty simple. If you're going to do one thing, cut out your sugars, because sugar and yeast, like we said, there's always candida, always one of the side effects. If you're going to do nothing else, cut out the sugar in your diet. Cut it down to almost nothing. We always talk about eating low carb and, eating the crappy carbohydrates. Get rid of that stuff. So diet has a big, big effect on autoimmune.
Yeah, diet is probably the biggest thing to start. So if you have a food allergy, identify it, get rid of it, clean your diet up, simplify your diet.
Rope it in.
Now, if you have an autoimmune disorder, simplify your diet. Don't get too creative. Don't get too wild. Bring your diet in. Cut down sugar. Cut down processed foods. Keep your insulin levels low, which usually means going a lot lower carb. A lot of people get great results when they go ketogenic. They start to consume less than 30 or 40 grams of carbs a day. They're not eating processed
anything.
You could do keto and eat processed foods. That's the thing, right? I mean, a lot of people eat low carb and they have a very high processed diet as well because they're eating a lot of the vegetable oil stuff, right? So, I mean, again, that's the first thing. Cut down sugar, cut down vegetable oils, cut down carbs, rein your food in. It's amazing just by doing that how much better people feel, right?
Get good results
right off the bat. So food is where you start.
Yeah.
So identify the cause, right? Identify that cause and effect. And that requires work from people. That requires, for some people, keeping a food journal, noticing when there's symptoms, because the body will tell you. If you've got rheumatoid arthritis and your joints are worse lately, well, that's where you want to pay attention to what you've been doing. Stress, eating, exercise, all these things. You want to pay attention to see if you can identify what's going on, right? Then you want to fix the gut. And in order to fix the gut, as I mentioned, there's 5 parts to digestion. Probiotics is a starting point, no question.
Yeah.
You have to start with a good probiotic. But you need a good digestive enzyme as well for the upper GI part. You need a good digestive enzyme as well, right? That's a big aspect of that. So you have your gut, fix the gut. If you go to our website, we have a great training on digestive health. Sign up for that, watch it. That's a great place to start. Then you have to help the immune system. Well, how do you help the immune system? What do you recommend for somebody that needs immune system help?
Well, again, you want to make sure you got good levels of vitamin D, because your immune system it doesn't work properly without vitamin D.
So they want to optimize vitamin D levels.
Always optimize vitamin D. And I always say, if you want to put your immune system to sleep, go back to food, sugar, right? So eliminate the sugar. Get your immune system where it can concentrate on what it needs to concentrate on and not be put to sleep by your poor diet. But the big thing on immunity is optimizing vitamin D. That's why some people are sensitive to the sun, especially with lupus, but then you got to take vitamin D as a supplement. It's very, very important for you.
All right, so we've covered a ton of stuff on this podcast. We're about 40 minutes in, so we're out of time. Again, if you have questions, just email us. You do Facebook Lives. There's a lot of ways to get a hold of us. Again, we want to thank you for listening. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Doctor Is In podcast from martinclinic.com. If you have any questions, you can reach us at info@martinclinic.com. If you're not a newsletter subscriber, you can head to our website and sign up for free. We also have a private Facebook group that you can join. It's a community of awesome people. Finally, I do a Facebook Live every Thursday morning at 8:30. Join us again next week for a new episode.